He can cook a shoe and it'll taste delicious. You don't even have to bring your own, he says. And that's neat. It's Tom White. This is Teaching to the Test Pattern.
Hey, buddy. Welcome to Teaching to the Test Pattern. This is a podcast for you, the video production educator, industry person, or even students who want to know about technology, about people, about how things happen in the quote-unquote real world, as well as in the classroom. So I'm Tom White. I'm your host, and this is part 2 of my conversation with a good friend of mine, Chris Williams. Chris and I work together in Atlanta, and that's pretty much what this episode is about. It's about Chris's career arc, how he ended up in New York, now based, in downtown in New York City, when he started his career in Athens as a 16-year-old. He's going to tell you about that and the persistence that it takes to get to where he's gotten. I'm going to talk a little bit about branding and about how you build a brand and how you make it something that people want. And that's one of the things that I think goes missing a lot in a classroom. And it's sad in that, as video people, we should build a brand. And our when we show up on site with a camera, people should go, oh, yeah, that's the school. Not go, I wonder what they're doing here. Oh, that's kids. It should be something that they're proud to hear and see and that kind of stuff. So we talk about that a good bit. We talk about our time in Atlanta. I want to thank our sponsor, Amatrace.com, AMITRACE.com. They make this possible. They make sure that I stay up to date on the latest information, including the new tech stuff, the new ATEM Mini 4K. Got an email from them about that this morning. If you're looking at that and you want to get it, give them a call. Just go to Amatrace.com, get their phone number, get an email, shoot them a message, call them, whatever. They've got it. It leverages NDI. So you don't have to run SDI cables. You can do everything over the network. But if you're scared of that, Cat 5 cable runs just like an SDI cable, except so much better. So go check them out, AMITRACE.com. That's Amatrace. They are our sponsor. And this is part 2 of my conversation with Chris Williams from iHeart Media.
Teaching to the Test Pattern.
So how did you go from Athens to iHeart Media, SVP, or yeah, that's it. Not SVP. Sorry, Chief Product Officer.
They're all just acronyms. I was in Athens, and so I wound up being there at that small mom and pop radio group for about 6 to 7 years. And one day I was in Atlanta at an artist showcase, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And because we were kind of running in the same circles between Athens and Atlanta, I mean, they're really close, and, a lot of bands would play one town versus the other and whatnot. People wind up getting to know each other, or knowing each other's names. And so I'm at an artist showcase. Somebody taps on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's a gentleman named Sean Demery, who unfortunately has passed away recently. And he was the music director for an Atlanta station called 99X. And it was one of the most influential alternative stations in the nation. And it certainly was a massive influence on the music scene and the culture of Atlanta back in the 90s. It was an alternative station. And so the guy to me was a legend. He was a star. And I turned around and he said, "Hey man, I've heard about you. Why don't you send me your tape and your resume?" And so that was my introduction to those guys. And I started having conversations with 99X. That was for an on-air gig. And I ultimately didn't get that gig, but they did hire me to come in and become a programming assistant. So I went from programming the radio stations in Athens, like I was the big cheese in Athens. And they offered me the gig to come to Atlanta to be the assistant to the people that ran the radio stations. And I said, boy, I'll tell you what, all I need is to get a foot in the door there. If I can just get a foot in the door, I'm going to show them what I can do. I'm going to show them what I'm about. So I took a pay cut to move from Athens to Atlanta to go become these folks' programming assistant. And thankfully, I mean, they were just wonderful people. They were incredibly generous with their knowledge. They were so creative and they were so encouraging about trying to be as innovative as possible. And I got in there and loved it and thrived in that situation, and ultimately became the program director for 99X. And then moved over and started working and so I was there for another 6 to 7 years before I then moved over and took a job with Clear Channel, which ultimately became iHeartRadio. And then that's where you and I worked together with what was 96 Rock and became Project 961, and ran that station for years. And then just kind of moved up the ranks. I think that what wound up happening is through the course of each one of those steps, I found myself really fortunate in that I landed in with a bunch of people who were all progressive thinkers and all were digital natives probably before their time at each step along the way. And so my stations wound up always being the first to have websites, and the first stations to stream, and the first stations to understand and adopt social media. That was one of the big advantages that we had at Project 961, is that we just were so far out front in recognizing the power that social media could play on helping build a brand and build the personality of a brand and connecting with an audience in real and meaningful ways. And so ultimately through all of those, through each of those steps and the successes that we achieved through each of those, iHeart recognized that as they were starting to become more digital thinking, that there was a big disconnect between digital people, meaning the people that build apps and websites, and people who are radio programmers and know how to speak to the radio audience. And they said, we need somebody to bridge that conversation. We need somebody who knows how to speak radio and somebody who also thinks digital to help come in and kind of moderate those conversations and give us the best chance to build a bridge between those two sides. And that's when I got that phone call, and they asked me to come up to New York and have conversations with them to see if there was something that I could do to help contribute to the kind of the newly launched, it was still in its infancy, the iHeartRadio app at the time.
You know, yesterday you brought up 96 Rock and Project 961. I was talking with one of the county officials out where I teach, and we were talking about the governor and, you know, how no matter what he does, he's going to get under scrutiny. And
Sure.
and I told him, I said, if nothing has solidified that I'll never run for public office, all of this has. And he's like, oh, you don't understand the hatred. And I said, oh, but I do. And I explained to him that, you know, I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving in 2006 because of 96 Rock. So it's funny how I still see plates for that every day. Every day.
Absolutely. I saw upside down 96 Rock plate on the front of a pickup 2 weeks ago.
And it's not a pickup from the 1970s. It's no. It's a brand new $30,000 truck with a lift kit and I don't know how they keep the tags so nice. I mean, they're brand new looking.
But you're right. These folks are going in, they're trading in their old pickup and they're getting a new one. And the thing that they do before they hand them the keys to that old truck is they go and they take those plates off the front. They hand them the keys. They take the keys to the new truck and they walk out there and they put their new plates they put the 96 Rock plate on the front of their new truck. And you know, I mean, that's the thing that really was that emotional connection. You know, I had a station, the first station that I programmed in Athens, like I said, was an alternative station. It was, you know, really cool. I mean, think about what a great music town, great college audience. We were able to do some really fun and exciting things. I love that station. And I think that if I probably look back on it right now, the mistakes that I made programming it probably would be an embarrassment to look at it because I knew very little of what I was doing. But that station had such a personality and it really was such a reflection of the city of Athens that we ultimately, our competitors bought us and flipped the format of the station to get us off the air. And I remember the day that we found out that we were bought. We found out that they were going to turn the radio station off. And we all went over, we picked a house and we all assembled and kind of had a party together to be together. And we were listening to the radio. And, you know, I was certainly bummed because, you know, that's not a great thing to go through. But what I wasn't expecting was the moment that the station turned off and they put some new thing on there, the emotional impact of that was as if a person had passed away. It really was I had lost a friend. And that for me was when I knew what great radio needed to be. And I said, you know what, from this point on, I'll never program a radio station without trying to accomplish the goal of making it feel like it's someone, that it's not just a jukebox that also gives you news, weather, and traffic every now and then, but that it actually represents a lifestyle, and it has a personality, and it has a point of view, and it has a sense of humor, and that a community can gather around it and feel some commonality and a shared experience around it. But it came from that moment of feeling that loss from a station that I had accidentally, I think, given personality without intentionally knowing how to do it. And it did set me up for, that's how you know you got it right. And that's what I have to try to strive to accomplish with everything else that I touch from here on. And frankly, it's the thing that as the iHeart Radio team works, and as we aspire to make our product better, if you stop and talk to any member of my team and you say, in 10 seconds or less, tell me what it is that you're trying to accomplish, every one of them would say to you, we're trying to make iHeartRadio the audio service that gets you. We're trying to make it your pal. We're trying to make it the service that knows what things you like and what things you don't like. And we go through and we filter through and say, man, if you like the Dr. Death podcast, boy, have we got something for you. You've got to listen to Dirty John. Like that, we're making those types of connections for people so that you start to feel like iHeartRadio is a person that you can trust and that you can rely on to do those things. It's not what we are today, but aspirationally, I'm trying to accomplish the same thing with that digital product as we worked so hard on with Project 961. And I think, frankly, not because of me, but because of everyone on the team and what everybody put into it, I think we accomplished in spades. I mean, I've never seen a radio station flip formats and like Project did when it changed and became Power 96.1, and have people physically protesting with signs, standing around, having marches and gathering at Centennial Olympic Park. Like that's never happened that I've ever seen before when a station flipped formats. But that wasn't because, boy, they really liked that DJ that was on the radio. That was because they felt like they had lost someone and something that was important in their lives. There
are people that I still talk to who the only reason I know them is that they were listeners, and I was never on the air. I was behind the scenes, and I have a neighbor who since moved out, but he called me. He doesn't know my name. He calls me Project because I drove the vehicle home one time, and he's like, "Hey, Project," and I see him in town, and he's like, "Hey, Project." I'm like, "Hey, buddy,"
I hear about it up here in New York from corporate folks people that I'd never met before, because at that time I didn't know anybody outside of Atlanta. We were running a station in Atlanta for Atlanta. I don't know any of the people that were in the corporate offices in New York. I don't know what they thought, how they were processing anything. I knew nothing about that side of the business. And every now and then I'll run across somebody and they're like, "Oh yeah, so what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I've been with the company for 15 years. Oh, what'd you do?" I'm from Atlanta. I ran stations. And they go, "Were you the station in Atlanta where people were?" Because what happened was there were so many phone calls, so many emails, so many complaints. The news coverage was so bad that it became a PR crisis for the New York corporate team to try to deal with, because they didn't anticipate that, because that doesn't happen. When a radio station goes away, most often people shrug and they go, "Oh, well, that's a bummer. What's next?" And so they didn't know they didn't anticipate that. And so, that's one of those points of pride that I go, I think that's a sign that we got it right.
Teaching to the test pattern.
There you go, wrapping up part 2 of my conversation with Chris Williams from iHeartMedia, Chief Product Officer there. And I wanted to say one of the things that Chris didn't mention that I think is very important to his story, and I know why he didn't mention it. It's not something that you would mention, but there was a time. There are 2 parts of that story. There was a time where he was let go and literally without a job for a couple of years. And in that time, he was like, I've got to do something with my time. And he learned things. He remodeled a garage into an extra bedroom. He did things like that. So he's always a learner. And that's one of those things that I think that that as a good teacher and as a good professional even, you should probably have that mindset. The other thing that he didn't talk about was his introduction to what is now iHeart Media. He literally was week to week. Like, he would show up on Monday, he would work, and on Friday he would have to go by the general manager's office and get a thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether or not he should show up on Monday. That's pretty impressive to have that tenacity and to come from that to be where he is now. Kudos to him. Part 3, go download it right now. It's fantastic. We get to talk about a little bit more about what Chris does and, talk about his successes and his failures and just things that challenge and reward. So thank you again for listening. Thank you again to Amatrace, our sponsor. Go check them out, AMITRACE.com. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and go make some awesome.
Teaching to the test pattern.